The five-star restaurant hummed with elegant conversation and soft jazz music as wealthy patrons enjoyed their evening meals. Suddenly, a young boy at the VIP table began screaming, pounding his fists on the white tablecloth as his cries echoed through the pristine dining room. Every head turned, whispers of annoyance rippling through the crowd. "Not again!" When the entire restaurant froze in uncomfortable silence, a young waitress stepped forward, walking calmly toward the distressed child. Emma Carter, 25, adjusted her simple black uniform and checked her reflection in the staff mirror one last time before beginning her evening shift at La Belle Epoque, the city's most exclusive restaurant. Her brown hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her face bore the determined expression of someone who'd learned to endure judgment with quiet dignity. The other servers barely acknowledged her presence. To them, Emma was just another small-town girl who'd somehow managed to land a job at their prestigious establishment, probably through connections or luck rather than skill. "She doesn't understand how things work here," whispered Jessica, a veteran waitress who served the restaurant's most important clientele. "These aren't the kind of customers you get at roadside diners. One mistake and she'll be gone." What they didn't know was that Emma needed this job desperately. Every paycheck went toward supporting her 18-year-old brother Marcus, who was autistic and required specialized care and therapy. She'd learned patience, compassion, and understanding through years of advocating for him in a world that often saw his differences as deficits rather than simply variations in how his brain worked. At table 12, the restaurant's most prominent VIP section, sat Alexander Hayes, 40, whose business empire had made him one of the country's youngest billionaires. His sharp suit and cold demeanor commanded respect and distance from everyone around him. But tonight, he wasn't conducting business or impressing clients. He was simply trying to have dinner with his 8-year-old son. Ethan Hayes was a beautiful child with his father's intelligent eyes and an otherworldly sensitivity to everything around him. The soft jazz music that other diners found soothing felt overwhelming to his heightened auditory processing. The clinking of silverware, the murmur of conversations, the subtle hum of air conditioning, it all layered together into a sensory assault that his 8-year-old nervous system couldn't filter. Alexander watched helplessly as Ethan's distress mounted. The child had been doing well lately, making progress with his therapist, communicating more clearly. But environments like this restaurant, with their unpredictable sensory inputs, could still trigger overwhelming episodes. When Ethan suddenly began screaming and hitting the table, the entire dining room fell silent. Other patrons turned with expressions ranging from curiosity to annoyance to poorly concealed disgust. "Can't they control that child?" one woman muttered loudly enough to be heard. "This is supposed to be a civilized establishment," another diner complained to their companion. The restaurant manager appeared, clearly uncomfortable with the disruption to his carefully curated atmosphere. Alexander saw the man approaching and felt the familiar surge of protective anger mixed with helpless frustration. That's when Emma stepped forward, moving past her assigned tables toward the commotion with purposeful calm. In her apron pocket, she unconsciously touched the bracelet Marcus had made for her, woven cords spelling out "Be patient" in colorful beads. While other staff members whispered nervously and the manager debated calling security, Emma approached Ethan's table with the quiet confidence of someone who'd navigated similar situations countless times. She knelt down beside Ethan's chair, bringing herself to his eye level without invading his personal space. The child was still crying, his hands pressed against his ears as he rocked back and forth, overwhelmed by the sensory chaos around him. "Hey, sweetheart," Emma said softly, her voice barely audible above Ethan's distress. "It's really loud in here, isn't it?" All those sounds mixing together, something in her tone, not the fake cheerfulness adults often use with children, not the impatient command to calm down, but genuine understanding, made Ethan pause his crying long enough to look at her. "The music and the talking and the dishes clinking, it's all too much at once," Emma continued, her voice steady and soothing. "That happens to my brother sometimes too. Would it help if we made it quieter?" Without waiting for permission from the manager, Emma caught the attention of the jazz trio and gestured for them to pause their performance. The sudden quiet that fell over the restaurant was profound, broken only by the soft sounds of Ethan's gradually calming breathing. From her apron pocket, Emma pulled out a small, smooth stone, something she always carried because pressure and texture helped Marcus when he was overwhelmed. She placed it gently on the table within Ethan's reach, not forcing it on him, just offering it as an option. "This is a worry stone," she explained quietly. "Sometimes when everything feels too big, it helps to have something small and smooth to hold. You don't have to use it, but it's there if you want it." Alexander watched in stunned silence as his son, who usually took hours to calm down from episodes like this, gradually stopped crying and reached for the stone. Ethan held it in both hands, running his thumbs over its smooth surface, his breathing becoming more regular. "Thank you," Ethan whispered, the first words he'd spoken all evening. "You're welcome," Emma replied gently. "You're very brave. I know that was scary." She stood up slowly, giving Ethan space, but remaining nearby in case he needed additional support. For the first time since arriving at the restaurant, Alexander felt like he could breathe normally. "How did you know what to do?" Alexander asked Emma quietly, his usual commanding tone replaced by genuine curiosity and gratitude. "My younger brother is autistic," Emma explained simply. "He's 18 now, but when he was Ethan's age, we went through situations like this pretty regularly. Every person is different, but sometimes the basic need is just for someone to understand that you're not being difficult. You're just overwhelmed." Alexander had worked with countless therapists, specialists, and behavioral consultants over the years. Some had been helpful, others less so, but none had ever managed to connect with Ethan as quickly and naturally as this waitress had in a matter of minutes. "I don't know how to thank you," Alexander said, and Emma was surprised to hear vulnerability in the voice of a man known for his corporate ruthlessness. "You don't need to thank me," Emma replied. "Ethan's a wonderful kid. He just experiences the world differently than most people do." Over the following weeks, Alexander found himself returning to La Belle Epoque regularly, always requesting Emma as their server. What started as gratitude gradually became something deeper, recognition that Emma saw Ethan not as a problem to be managed, but as a whole person deserving of respect and understanding. When Alexander finally approached Emma with an unexpected proposition, becoming Ethan's companion and tutor, she was initially hesitant, but looking at Ethan's hopeful face, she found herself saying yes. News of the billionaire's autistic son and his working-class caregiver spread through social media and gossip columns with the speed and cruelty that only modern media could achieve. The story was picked up by business journals, lifestyle magazines, and celebrity blogs, each spinning it according to their own agenda. "Hayes heirs public meltdown," screamed one headline, accompanied by blurry photos taken by other restaurant patrons. "Billionaire's desperation hires Waitress as son's handler," read another with commentary questioning Alexander's judgment and Emma's qualifications. The scrutiny was intense and often vicious. Online commenters debated everything from Alexander's parenting abilities to whether Emma was exploiting a vulnerable family for financial gain. Some praised Alexander for seeking help, while others criticized him for not controlling his son better in public. Emma found herself the target of particularly cruel speculation. "Gold digger using a disabled kid to get close to money," read one comment. "Probably doesn't even have a brother. Just researched autism online to manipulate the situation," claimed another. The pressure reached a breaking point at the annual Hartford Foundation Gala, a charity event that brought together the city's wealthiest philanthropists. Alexander had brought Emma as his guest, both to support her in her new role and to make a statement about his family's priorities. Richard Blackwood, a prominent investor and longtime rival of Alexander's, saw the gala as an opportunity to publicly undermine his competitor. "Alexander," Richard announced loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "I have to ask, don't you think it's irresponsible to put your son's care in the hands of someone with no professional credentials? A waitress playing therapist seems like a dangerous game." Before Alexander could respond, Ethan, who had been quietly drawing at their table, suddenly became distressed by the hostile energy in the conversation. The combination of Richard's aggressive tone, the crowded ballroom, and the underlying tension triggered another overwhelming episode. Ethan began crying and stimming, repetitive movements that helped him self-regulate, while conversations around them stopped and people began to stare. "See," Richard continued cruelly, "this is exactly what I'm talking about. The child clearly needs professional help, not some amateur playing house with the Hayes family. This time, instead of stepping back in embarrassment, Emma moved immediately to Ethan's side. She knelt beside his chair and began speaking in the calm, low voice that had become familiar to him over the months they'd worked together. "I know this is hard," she said quietly, ignoring the dozens of eyes watching them. "There are a lot of people and it's very bright and loud. But you're safe. I'm right here." She didn't try to stop his stimming or force him to make eye contact. Instead, she simply provided a calm, steady presence while he worked through his overwhelming emotions. As Ethan gradually calmed down, Emma stood and faced Richard with quiet dignity. "You're right that I'm not a licensed therapist," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. "But I am someone who sees Ethan as a complete person, not as a problem to be fixed. I'm someone who understands that autism isn't something wrong with him. It's just a different way his brain works." She turned to address the broader crowd of wealthy donors and socialites. "Every person in this room probably considers themselves an advocate for children. You donate money to pediatric hospitals and educational foundations. But how many of you have ever made an effort to actually understand a child whose needs are different from your own?" Alexander stood, placing a supportive hand on Emma's shoulder. "Emma has done more for my son's development and happiness in 3 months than years of expensive specialists achieved," he said firmly. "Not because she has a degree on her wall, but because she approaches Ethan with genuine respect and understanding." He looked directly at Richard. "If you want to question my judgment, question it based on results. My son is happier, more confident, and more willing to engage with the world than he's ever been. That's not amateur hour. That's exactly what professional help should look like." An elderly woman at a nearby table, Mrs. Hartford, whose foundation hosted the gala, stood up slowly. "I've worked with special needs children for 40 years, she said in a clear voice that commanded attention. "What I just witnessed was a textbook crisis intervention." This young woman knew exactly what she was doing. The ballroom erupted in applause, and Richard found himself facing a room full of people who had just seen authentic expertise in action. The gala incident marked a turning point not just in public perception, but in the Hayes family dynamics. Alexander began scaling back his travel schedule and working from home more frequently, wanting to be present for Ethan's continued progress and to support the remarkable relationship developing between his son and Emma. Emma's approach to working with Ethan was unlike anything Alexander had experienced with previous therapists. Instead of trying to make Ethan conform to neurotypical expectations, she helped him develop strategies for navigating a world that often wasn't designed for people like him. She taught him about sensory breaks, showed him how to advocate for his own needs, and most importantly, never made him feel like his autism was something to be ashamed of. "Watch this, Daddy," Ethan said one afternoon, demonstrating a new communication technique Emma had taught him. Instead of struggling to find words when he was overwhelmed, Ethan now had a set of cards he could use to express his needs. Too loud, need a break, feeling good, and others. "This is incredible," Alexander told Emma privately. "He's never had this level of self-advocacy before." "He always had it in him," Emma replied. "He just needed someone to believe he could learn these skills instead of assuming he couldn't." The changes weren't just in Ethan's behavior. Alexander found himself learning and growing as well. Emma helped him understand that many of the behaviors he'd been trying to eliminate weren't problems to be solved, but natural parts of how Ethan's brain worked. "Stimming helps him regulate his nervous system," Emma explained when Alexander worried about Ethan's hand flapping during a shopping trip. "It's not hurting anyone, and it's helping him stay calm. Why would we want to stop that?" Gradually, their professional relationship evolved into something deeper. Alexander found himself looking forward to Emma's insights, not just about autism and child development, but about life in general. Her grounded perspective and genuine empathy were qualities he'd rarely encountered in his usual social circles. One evening, as they watched Ethan playing independently in the living room, something that would have been impossible months earlier, Alexander realized how much his entire world had changed. "Emma," he said quietly, "I need you to know that you've given me my son back. But more than that, you've shown me what real strength looks like." Emma smiled, watching Ethan successfully navigate a challenging puzzle. You both taught me something too. You showed me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about people who see your worth and choose to stand by you. That night, Ethan surprised them both by drawing a picture of 3 people holding hands under a bright sun, carefully labeling it, "My family." Neither adult could speak for several minutes after seeing it. 1 year later, at the opening ceremony for the Hayes Foundation's new Autism Support Center, Alexander stood at the podium with Emma and Ethan beside him, facing an audience of families, advocates, and professionals. "A year ago, my son had a meltdown in a restaurant, and everyone looked away except one person," Alexander said, his voice steady with conviction. Emma stepped forward when others stepped back, and she taught us both that autism isn't something to hide or fix. It's simply a different way of experiencing the world that deserves understanding and respect. Ethan squeezed Emma's hand tightly as the crowd rose in applause. Sometimes the most profound love is shown not by trying to change someone, but by accepting them completely and helping the world see their worth.